Imagine cruising through the infinite expanse of space aboard the Avalon, a sleek interstellar vessel bound for the thriving colony of Homestead 2. But hold on to your seats, because this journey is about to take a twist. As the ship glides on autopilot, its corridors echo with emptiness, as every single one of its 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers are in deep hibernation, catching some cosmic Z's. Just when you thought it was smooth sailing, bam. The Avalon plows through an asteroid belt, sending its shields into overdrive. Powers rerouted, but danger lurks ahead in the form of a mammoth asteroid. Crash. The impact rocks the ship, sending systems into frenzy as alarms blare and lights flicker. In the midst of the chaos, a hibernation pod stirs, and out steps Jim Preston, an unsuspecting mechanical whiz. A robotic voice greets him, breaking the news that he's been out cold for a staggering 120 years. And get this, they're just 4 months away from Homestead 2. But fear not, because it's not all doom and gloom. Jim's promised some serious downtime before they hit the planet's surface, with all the swanky amenities the ship has to offer. Armed with his trusty ID band, Jim sets off to his cabin, eager to dive headfirst into the ship's array of top-notch activities. Jim's heart races with excitement and nerves as he gets set to mingle with his fellow shipmates. After a quick prep in his cabin, he strides into a high-tech classroom buzzing with holographic lessons. But the upbeat vibes quickly sour as the hologram drones on about Earth's woes. It's packed, it's pricey, and it's just not living up to the hype. Despite being told to save questions for later, Jim can't help but blurt out his confusion about being the Lone Ranger in class. Realizing the hologram's not gonna spill the beans, Jim decides to hit the pavement and find some real faces. But the main concourse is a ghost town. A helpful automated info desk offers assistance, but Jim craves a real convo. So, off he goes to find a steward, only to find an empty room yet again. Not one to give up easily, he aims for the big guns, the captain. But even the bridge is deserted. His curiosity piqued, Jim heads to the observatory and gets hit with a bombshell. They're a staggering 90 years away from Homestead 2. Talk about a reality check. Realizing he's jumped the gun big time, Jim rushes back to the concourse, desperate for answers. But reaching out to Earth proves to be a lesson in patience, with a message taking a whopping 55 years for a response. Talk about a buzzkill. With a heavy heart, Jim seeks solace in the ship's bar, hoping for a friendly face. And what do you know? He finds one, sort of. The bartender, Arthur, is unlike any bartender Jim's ever met, because he's an android. With a head full of questions, Jim tries to pry info from Arthur, but the poor bot's just as stumped as he is. Lost in a sea of uncertainty and with more questions than answers, Jim's cosmic adventure takes an unexpected turn, with mysteries lurking around every corner. The next day dawns, and Jim drags himself out of bed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. A trip to the cantina reveals a harsh reality. Most of the goodies on the menu are VIP only. Sighing, he settles for a basic coffee and ponders over fixing his hibernation chamber. Armed with tools, he tries to crack the code, but it's a no-go. Frustrated, he attempts to hack into the crew's chambers, but it's like banging his head against a digital wall. As glitches start to pepper the ship's systems, Jim finds himself gravitating back to the bar, not just for the drinks, but for the company of Arthur, the android bartender. Arthur drops some wisdom bombs, urging Jim to seize the moment and break into the gold class area for a taste of luxury. Jim dives headfirst into the ship's offerings, the fancy restaurants, the high-tech games, the swanky entertainment, but the hollow feeling in his chest only grows. One day, drowning his sorrows, he stumbles upon the hibernation pods and then an airlock with spacesuits. With a cocktail of despair and curiosity, Jim suits up and steps into the void of space. The breathtaking view momentarily distracts him, but the crushing loneliness soon sets in. Returning inside, he sheds the suit but finds himself drawn back to the airlock, this time without any protection. With a heart heavy with sorrow, he toys with the idea of ending it all, but a glimmer of hope stays his hand. Rushing back inside, he takes a tumble but picks himself up, his eyes locking onto a woman in one of the pods, Aurora. Desperate for connection, Jim dives into her files, listening to her passenger interview and finding himself utterly captivated. As time ticks by, Jim finds himself glued to Aurora's pod, still engrossed in her interviews. Back at the bar, he delves into her written works, discussing them with Arthur, who, being an android, struggles to grasp Jim's emotional turmoil. Jim becomes fixated on the bitter irony of his situation, journeying to a new world for a fresh start, only to wake up too soon and find his perfect match tantalizingly out of reach. The idea of waking Aurora begins to gnaw at Jim's mind. He debates the moral quandary with Arthur, torn between his longing for companionship and the realization that waking her would condemn her to the same fate of being marooned on the ship. Initially, Jim decides against it, but as days turn into weeks, he finds himself unable to shake the idea. Finally, he takes the plunge. Sneaking to Aurora's pod, he activates it and retreats to his room, his heart pounding with anticipation. Moments later, he ventures to the main concourse, hoping to find her. And there she is, just as bewildered as he was a year ago. Leading her to the observatory, Jim breaks the news gently they're the only ones awake, and he's unable to access vital areas of the ship. Panic sets in for Aurora, who desperately wants to return to her pod. But Jim lays it bare, there's no equipment on board to help them re-enter hibernation. They return to the concourse, where Jim urges Aurora to rest after her awakening. Moved by his solitary struggle, Aurora expresses sympathy for Jim, who has spent over a year alone on the ship. Back at the bar, Jim's got a heavy heart about what he did. He leans over to Arthur, asking him to keep quiet about waking up Aurora. The next day, Aurora pops out of her pod, and she's on a mission. She heads straight to the concourse, quizzing the info desk about the hibernation pods. Jim tags along, and they decide to grab some grub. But as they leave, the info desk goes haywire. Over breakfast, Aurora notices Jim's been chowing down on the same old thing for ages and surprises him with a fancy menu. They chat about fixing the pods, but Jim's throwing in the towel while Aurora's still got fight left in her. Aurora goes on a ship-wide scavenger hunt, checking out the infirmary, digging into research docks, and even trying to bust into the crew's hibernation quarters. Meanwhile, Jim's noticing more and more things going wrong around the ship, adding to the tension. As days pass, Aurora starts to feel the weight of their situation. She finds comfort in writing, exercising, and some serious soul-searching. She sits down with Jim in the cantina, curious about his backstory. At first, Jim gives her the company line, but eventually spills the beans about his hopes for a fresh start on the new planet. In the cozy observatory, Aurora spills the beans about her ticket. It's not a one-way ride like the others. She's got a round-trip pass, aiming to spend a year on Homestead 2 before jetting back to Earth to make headlines as the first journalist to pull off such a stunt. But as they face the harsh reality of their situation, Aurora's optimism begins to dwindle. But Jim's not about to throw in the towel just yet. Determined to brighten Aurora's mood, he whisks her away on a spree across the ship, dancing, catching a flick, shooting hoops, hoping to inject a bit of joy into their gloomy circumstances. Their final stop, the bar, where Jim introduces her to his pal, Arthur. For a fleeting moment, Aurora lets her guard down, but the weight of their predicament quickly brings her back to reality. Seeking solace, Jim busies himself with a project, while Aurora stumbles upon a touching surprise in the observatory, a meticulously crafted miniature Chrysler building, a testament to Jim's growing affection. Later, they enjoy a romantic dinner date at the bar, swapping stories and sharing laughs. Aurora opens up about the pain of losing her dad during her teenage years. Afterwards, Jim takes Aurora on a breathtaking spacewalk, venturing into the vast expanse beyond the ship's walls. Finally, Jim has someone to share the mind-blowing beauty of the cosmos with. Back inside, their emotions run high, culminating in a tender moment and a night spent cuddled up together. As days turn into weeks, they settle into a cozy routine as a couple. Aurora moves into Jim's cabin, and they explore every nook and cranny of the ship together, enjoying meals, workouts, and quiet moments of togetherness. Meanwhile, Jim continues to uncover hidden corners of the ship, stumbling upon the hydroponics bay where he surprises Aurora with a bouquet of fresh flowers, a simple yet heartfelt gesture of his growing affection. As the spaceship glides past a huge red giant star, Jim and Aurora dash to the observatory to catch a glimpse of the stunning sight. Little do they know, it's Aurora's birthday. Later that night, they hit up one of the ship's fancy restaurants to celebrate before heading to the bar for more fun. Feeling jittery, Jim sneaks off to the bathroom to grab a special ring he made for Aurora. Meanwhile, Aurora hangs out with Arthur at the bar, clueless about the bombshell he's about to drop. The android spills the beans, revealing Jim's secret about waking her up early. When Jim returns, Aurora's mood takes a nosedive. She's shocked and furious, and before Jim can explain, she bolts, leaving him with a heavy heart. Back in his cabin, Jim finds it empty. Aurora's disappeared. The next day, Jim spots Aurora in the cantina, but she runs off before he can say a word. Aurora's desperate and angry. One night, she storms into Jim's cabin, ready to unleash her fury. She's punching and kicking, driven by the betrayal she feels. Jim tries to talk to her over the comms since she won't see him face to face. He tells her he loves her, but Aurora's not having it. She's too hurt and angry to forgive him for messing with her life. One fateful night, as Jim lounges in his cabin, yet another malfunction rocks the ship. A critical error sends the main command into shutdown mode, plunging the vessel into chaos. Later, as Jim steps into the elevator, it grinds to a halt, malfunctioning once again. Meanwhile, Aurora strolls into the main concourse, only to discover Jim has planted a tree amidst the sterile surroundings. Perplexed, she heads to the cantina, where the food dispensary is also on the fritz. Suddenly, their attention is drawn to the voice of the deck chief over the comms, demanding to know who planted the tree. Racing to the concourse, Jim and Aurora find Gus Mancuso standing before the tree. Introductions are made, and they brief the chief on the ship's escalating malfunctions. Bewildered, Mancuso struggles to comprehend how 3 pods could fail simultaneously. Guiding them to the bridge, Mancuso discovers anomalies in the ship's systems that require manual investigation. As they exit, narrowly avoiding a falling robot, Jim and Aurora express concern over the increasing frequency of malfunctions. Mancuso reassures them that such occurrences shouldn't happen, instructing them on how to gather crucial data. While Mancuso checks on the pods, Jim joins him, unraveling the mystery behind Aurora's malfunctioning pod. Horrified by Jim's actions, Mancuso condemns his recklessness. Later, at the bridge, as Aurora joins him, they discuss the grim reality of her pod's fate, with Jim lamenting his inability to intervene. Their conversation is interrupted when Jim arrives with yet another broken robot. Mancuso, succumbing to the effects of hibernation sickness, retreats to rest, but not before coughing up blood, a grim reminder of the perilous state of their journey. That night, Aurora couldn't catch any Z's, so she decided to hit the pool for a swim. But out of the blue, the ship's gravity went wonky, tossing her around like a ragdoll in the water. Just when things looked bleak, gravity kicked back in, barely saving her skin. As she scrambles to find help, she runs into Jim, who's also on a mission to find Mancuso. Together, they rush to the bridge where Mancuso's piecing together the ship's troubles. Turns out, there was a big blowout 2 years back that messed up a major system, sending the ship on a downward spiral of malfunctions. Realizing they're in deep water, Mancuso tells them they've got to fix the root cause before they're all stuck in space limbo. They gear up to hunt down the problem, but Mancuso takes a nosedive, leaving Jim and Aurora to haul him to the infirmary. Despite their efforts, Mancuso's on his last legs, leaving Jim and Aurora with heavy hearts. In a somber moment in the observatory, Mancuso passes on his ID bracelet to Jim, urging them to keep fighting for the ship. But before they can catch their breath, alarms start blaring, signaling more trouble ahead. With time ticking away, Jim and Aurora brace themselves for the next disaster. But their plans hit a snag when the gravity drive goes kaput again, followed by a meltdown that takes out Arthur, leaving Jim with no choice but to power him down to prevent further chaos. In a race against time, Jim and Aurora bolt to engineering, eager to fix the ship's woes. They pop open the power plant hatch, hoping to spot what's causing the chaos. But disaster strikes when Aurora gets sucked into a breach caused by that pesky asteroid. Jim fights tooth and nail with the hatch, fearing it might squish him like a bug. After a nail-biting struggle, they patch up the breach, only to find more holes in the ship's hull. Following the asteroid's trail of destruction, they pinpoint the damage to the reactor control computer. Jim's hopeful they can scrounge up some replacement parts, but their optimism takes a nosedive when the venting system flops not once, but twice. Facing a mountain of problems, Jim makes a gutsy call to step outside and sort things out in the vacuum of space. As Jim gears up for his daring spacewalk, he passes Mancuso's bracelet to Aurora, bracing her for the risks ahead. She helps him suit up, her nerves frayed with worry. With a lump in her throat, she watches him vanish into the airlock, feeling a pang of dread at the thought of being left alone to fend off the impending crisis. Meanwhile, inside the reactor room, temperatures skyrocket, sending shivers down Aurora's spine. A sudden surge zaps her arm, sending shockwaves of pain through her body. Outside, Jim's laser focused on the vent door, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. With bated breath, he urges Aurora to kickstart the reactor venting, despite her jitters and growing fears. In a heart-to-heart chat, Jim stresses the urgency of saving their fellow passengers, nudging Aurora to muster the courage needed to stare danger in the face. The rescue attempt goes off, but those reactor fumes knock Jim for a loop, breaking his tether and putting him in real danger. With his suit on the fritz, he fills Aurora in, and she springs into action, racing to grab another suit and haul him in. But it's a nail-biter. Her own tether is too short, and it seems like all hope is lost until she snags onto his tether and yanks him to safety. It's a close call, but they're not out of the woods yet. Aurora hustles Jim to the infirmary, praying he'll make it, but when they get there, it's gut-wrenching. Jim's gone. She's not ready to let him slip away, though, so she punches in some commands on Mancuso's bracelet, willing the medical pod to work its magic. Miraculously, Jim comes back to life, and in that moment, they bury the hatchet, letting go of past hurts to embrace what's ahead. In the aftermath, Aurora gets to work fixing up Arthur, while they pay their respects to Mancuso with a quiet send-off. Meanwhile, Jim hatches a plan to turn the medical pod into a makeshift hibernation chamber, offering Aurora the chance to sleep away the rest of the journey. But she's not having it. She'd rather stay awake and face whatever comes next, as long as they're together. As the days roll by, Jim finally gathers the courage to pop the question, and with a resounding yes from Aurora, they embark on a new chapter together aboard the Avalon. And when they finally reach Homestead 2, it's a whole new world for the snoozing crew, who never expected to find Jim and Aurora awake and ready to start their next adventure. In a touching message left behind, Aurora shares the incredible story of their love and resilience, a beacon of hope for anyone who's ever dared to dream in the vast expanse of space. And that's where this video ends. Watch the next one and take care.